Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's training webinar. My name is Matt Simpson. I'm from the Technical Support Department here at Deepsea Electronics, and as you can probably see, I'm working from home today to maintain social distancing. Before I get talking too much, what would be really good is if I could just get a hand raise on Zoom, just so I know you can all hear me. So if you could just give me a hand raise, that'd be great. Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Great stuff. I'm just going to lower everyone's hands now. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I'll be taking the course today, and today's course is just a basic introduction to Deepsea Electronics, really, an introduction to our products, to the departments, to technical literature, how to find your way around the website, and then we'll do a little bit of technical stuff towards the end of the course. It's just to get you to familiar with really what Deepsea is. Some of you may find it really easy, some of you might, probably know all this stuff anyway, but it's just good to get familiar again. We normally have a panelist on the course, but because of the content of today's course, we didn't really need one, so it's just myself. That being said, I must make you aware that if the internet connection does drop out at my home, then please stay online, give it a couple of minutes, and hopefully it'll come back. It's unlikely to happen, but just in case it does, there won't be any panelist online, just to pre-warn you. So yeah, my name is Matt. I'm part of the technical support team here at Deepsea Electronics. I'm part of a global technical support department. I work in the UK. There's a couple of us in the team here in the UK, and then throughout the world, we've got other technical support engineers working all over the world in the USA, Brazil, the Middle East, the Far East, India. We've got technical support engineers across the world. So when you contact us via email or even by phone, if you ring the UK number, for example, you'll be coming through to myself or one of the support team in the UK. If you drop us an email, then we'll try and look and see what region you're in and pass your email to the relevant person in that area. So yeah, today's course, Introduction to Deepsea, I expect it to last about an hour. This is the first time we've actually done this course, so massive thank you for those who've taken the time to join, really appreciate it. But like I say, it should last about an hour, but we'll just have to kind of see how it goes, really. I think once it gets beyond an hour, I try and kind of wrap things up because I know it can be a bit long. So yeah, I'm going to go off camera now because I guess you don't really need to see me throughout the course, and I'm just going to be staring at my screen anyway, and I'm going to switch over to my computer screen. So if I could just get another hand raised just to see that you're all still with me, and then I'll move on. Okay, brilliant, fantastic. So I'm just going to lower all the hands there. Now, as we go on the course, do feel free to ask some questions. Obviously, everyone's microphone is muted, so you can only hear myself. And I can see everyone who's on the course, but I know you can't see each other. But if you do want to ask any questions or pass any comments, say thank you or whatever you want to do, just fire it into the Q&A I am on Zoom. And at certain points, I'll probably just stop and have a quick look and see if there's any good questions or things I need to cover. And I'll just go over them again. So the first thing you probably need to do is just give you a bit of an overview of what today is all about. So can I just actually, can I just get a hand raise? Everyone can see the presentation okay there? It's clear and everything? Yeah, brilliant, fantastic. Okay, great. Just lower all those hands, that's fantastic. Okay, so yeah, I've already gone through the tech support department, and the rest of the course I'm going to introduce you to the DSE company, tell you a little bit about the company history, introduce you to the DSE product range. We're going to have a quick run through like an overview of the range, basic module operation, just how to stop and start a generator really, and understanding what the buttons do on the fascia. Explain a little bit about what you can do on the front panel, so what we call the front panel editor, how you access that. Introduction to Config Suite. So Config Suite is a program you use to configure your generator controller or your ATS. It's the sort of standard product, standard software that you would use. We'll talk about how to understand the SCADA information, and then at the end, towards the end of the course, we're going to do a firmware update on a live set, so you can see what that involves as well. Okay, great. So let's move on. So the first thing that we're going to go to is the Deepsea website, because a lot of things I'm going to be talking about in the next 10-15 minutes or so really are just all on the website. So the website address is deepseaelectronics.com, and then once you've typed in deepseaelectronics.com, you'll come to this page here. Now, the first thing I recommend you do is, I'm obviously logged in here. If you're not registered with the website, I recommend that you get registered, because once you're registered, that allows you to download Configuration Suite, and it allows you access to all our technical literature, so operators manuals, software manuals, training documents, etc. And we'll touch on that a little bit as we go through the course. What I'll do first of all is I'll just explain a little bit about Deepsea Electronics, because a common question we get asked is, where does the name Deepsea Electronics come from? So here we go. We've got a bit of a timeline here. If you actually go to the website and click on the About Us page and then scroll down, I'm just going to go down to our timeline here. So the name Deepsea Electronics Limited came from how the company originally originated, basically how it kind of all started. The company was founded by Ats Scada, and he basically was working in the offshore oil and gas industry as a diver, and at the time was using headsets which were kind of substandard, so he decided to basically make his own headsets, and that's where the name Deepsea came from. And as time went by, the name just kind of, as we moved into different markets, the name just stayed and remained, continued making headsets and things like that. So it just became a brand name, and it was just decided to kind of keep on with it. Really, most people now, you know, they refer to Deepsea or DSE, and the kind of the Deepsea almost gets kind of, the Deepsea Electronics name kind of almost gets, it's just one of those things that kind of gets forgotten about a little bit, really, but that's where the name originated from. So as time's gone by, we've made numerous controllers and different kind of gensets. We've been kind of innovating as we've gone along. So we kind of moved into making gensets controllers in the late 70s, early 80s. We were one of the first companies to put LEDs, little LEDs lighting into the actual controllers. Premises have moved twice. We're now based in Hunman Bay, which is up in North Yorkshire, just outside Filey. In 2001, we will move to the premises that we're based at now, which is where we are now, and we actually built an on-site generator house as well. So everything that you buy from us, in terms of genset application at least, is actually tested on a real live generator. And we've actually got 3 generators here at Deepsea Electronics. We've kind of got a 100 kilowatt set, 220 kilowatt set, and then I think a set heading to close to 300 kilowatts. They've all got Deepsea panels on them, but they're all different engines, they're all different alternators, they're all different AVRs, different governors, but they all synchronize together. So we've got a wide variety of application knowledge for testing. So we do actually test everything in real life as well. We don't just do it all on the computer, it's actually tested in situ in real life. And the business has continued to grow. You can see as we go through the timeline there, we've expanded. In 2015, we expanded our what I call our generator house. We added a training room in there. So if you were actually going to come to Deepsea Electronics and do training, we would actually be doing it in our generator house on live gensets. Obviously, that's kind of on hold now because of the coronavirus outbreak. And that brings us kind of up to date where we are now, which is 2020. But in 2017, we moved into the PLC and off-highway market, which we're going to touch on in a little while. And then in 2018, we actually extended our stores as well and changed how we ship things. So, you know, I could sit here and just repeat everything that's on the website, which I'm going to I'm trying to avoid. But if you do want to take the time, you want to learn more about the company history, when things happened, when products were released, this timeline here on the About page is very useful, just to give you an idea of where we've kind of came from, really. Okay, so let's just go back to the top of the page. So let me just give you a bit of an overview of the website. Top left here, we've got our products, and we've got 4 ranges of products, which I'm going to come back to in a little while, but I'm just going to briefly explain what they are. We've got the green range, which is the Genset range. So these is basically all our Genset controllers, which is auto start controllers and mains failure controllers. We'll come back to that in a little while. I'm going to just skip over the purple range for now. The ATS range, which is the kind of blue range, if you like. ATS stands for auto transfer switch. So this is basically controllers which just transfer one load from one breaker to another breaker, in effect. So it's like what we call an auto transfer switch. Again, I'll go into that in more detail as we go through the course. We've got the power range, which is the red range, and this is essentially our battery charger range. So we make intelligent and non-intelligent battery chargers as well as power supplies. And these tend to get bought and tied in with our genset controller range, because every generator tends to need a battery charger as well, because the generator can be left idle for long periods of time. So these are kind of the chargers we make at Deepsea. They're not like the ones you'd find in your local Halford store. These are like high-end application battery chargers, intelligent chargers that you'd find on a much larger engine, where the battery for a generator is obviously going to be significantly larger. And then we have the control range, which is a kind of well, I'd say a new market, but it's not really a new market anymore for us. We've been in this market for 4 years now. And the control range are basically industrial PLCs. So, for example, a fire engine would have like a PLC that ties in the engine ECU, ties in the pump control system, the ladder system, the water filtering system, the suspension. You'll have a PLC that'll tie all that in together, so it all works as one. So whoever makes the ladders will have their own ECU. Whoever makes the pump system will have their own ECU. And then what would hopefully happen is they'd use our PLC to kind of tie everything in together, so that it kind of works as one. Okay, so that's just a brief overview. We're going to come back to that in a little while and just give you a bit more information on how it all kind of works. Support section. Obviously, I'm in the support team. So if you've got any questions you want to ask, you can fire them in here. And you've also got a list of frequently asked questions on here as well. So common question: what size charger should I use for a battery that is used to start a battery on a generator? So we've just got common questions we get asked here. And you probably find that a lot of the questions you want to email in and ask us will actually be covered on here. So please take the time to look through the FAQ section on the website, because you may well find a lot of information in there. You'll also find information on our distributors. So if you're not from the UK, who do you contact in your region to order a genset? You simply just go on the website here, and you'll basically find a list of all our distributors, and then you can contact them accordingly. The training section is a new section we just launched, which hopefully I'm sure many of you will have seen. You will have had to see it to kind of sign up to this webinar. And we're going to be putting more on here as time goes by, and hopefully as restrictions become lifted again, we'll be doing more in-house training. For those of you who aren't aware, we were doing a monthly training course here at Deepsea Electronics. We'd alternate between a basic training course, which is similar to what we're doing today, but obviously it takes all day. And we do an advanced training course, which is more about load sharing and synchronizing, how to configure your controller to do that. But then we're on hold at the moment, so we're kind of moving into more of an online platform. And we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future, I think. And it may even be something that happens long term, just because we've had such a good response. But while I'm here, I'll just take the opportunity actually to give you a bit of an insight of up and coming courses. We've obviously got some M series courses here, so control courses, which some of you may find relevant, but I think for today, really, you're probably going to be looking at the Genset and ATS type kind of courses. So next, on the 28th of August, we've got an introduction to the advanced DSE PLC editor. So we've just actually updated our PLC editor within our module. So we've got a course on that. And then the following week, on the 11th of September, we've got one on synchronizing, the 4 steps to synchronizing. So please do keep checking on the website. The response we have from these training courses is absolutely incredible, and they fill up very quickly. In some cases, within a matter of hours, we've completely filled the course. So please keep checking back on the website, sign up to the marketing emails, and as soon as you see the courses become available, if you think it's something you're interested in, get signed up and get yourself on the course. Distributors. So we talked about, you could find that information in the support section as well, but there's just a list of distributors in here as well. If you want to find someone, you know, quickly or in your region, you can just scroll through the website here and you'll find them all on here. And then the contact section as well. So there's a get in touch section here. And also there's also our contact details here. So if you want to contact support, you can do that here. And if you want to contact sales, you can do that here as an email address here. And it just gives you opening times as well for all our other outposts. If you want to contact any of those, you can do. And we do have also this inquiry type, this get in touch inquiry type. I know a lot of people see these on websites and think that they get ignored. We actually read every single one. So if you do fill it out and submit it, I can assure you it will be read. And from a support point of view, when we get an email in, we generally respond to that email within a matter of hours, sometimes immediately. We're very keen on responding to customers as quickly as possible. Some things are better discussed over the phone, some things better discussed over email, but whatever it is you want to discuss, get it sent in on here and we'll respond as soon as possible. So if we just go back to our products. Oh, one thing I should show you as well, actually. If we just go to YouTube and go to Deepsea Electronics. We do have a Deepsea Electronics YouTube channel, and I'll just pause that. And on here you'll find all our training videos, and we're really getting into producing more and more videos now as time goes by. So some of the things I'm talking about today, for example, getting familiar with Config Suite, reading and making changes, firmware updates. We've actually already got some videos on the website, and I'll be going over those again today. But if you miss anything or you just want to see a short video, maybe one of your colleagues is going to site or something and you just want to get them familiar with Deepsea, you can just have a quick look on our YouTube channel and you'll find information out on there as well. So just while I'm here, I'll just want to bring that to your attention. So let's just go back to our product range. Actually, what would be good now, actually, is if we could just get a hand raised, just to make sure I'm not, I've still got everyone online and people could hear me okay. Fantastic, yeah. So, yeah, it's difficult for me, obviously, when I'm talking, only thing I hear is my own voice. So I can't read people's faces or anything, or get an idea whether I'm boring people. So please, you know, appreciate you raising their hands, because it just, you know, I've just had 25 people raise their hands there. So I know that you guys are all listening. So that's very much appreciated and shows I'm kind of going in the right direction. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit more of an insight now into our range and explain a little bit more about what they mean. So the first range we'll talk about is the Genset range. So just click on that. This is primarily our controllers that are specific to generators. So hence why we call it the Genset range, and it's marked with the sort of the green green color to indicate that it's for Genset. So there's really two types of Genset controllers. There's what we call the auto start controllers, or ASC, or just, you know, a standalone generator controller, and then there's the AMF controllers. Okay, so I'll just give you a bit of a clearer idea of what that really means. So this one here, the auto start control, if we just take a common module, which is for a good example, the 7310. 7310 means that it's a standalone generator controller, and basically it will start the generator and open and close a breaker. Okay, and it will do that automatically. So when it's in auto mode, if someone wires an input to the controller and flicks a switch, the generator will start automatically, or it might be on a schedule, so it will start automatically every couple of days or every couple of hours. Or it may be that manually you want to start it, so you just go and press the manual button and start the generator. And I'll show you how that's done shortly. So you can see here you've got all your buttons along the bottom here. Go into a little bit more detail about what those buttons do. And then you've got an LED indicator here to say the generator is actually available. And if you want to place it on load, you press that button there, it closes the breaker, and then your building or whatever it is you've got on site is basically powered. So that's a standalone Genset controller, what we call an auto start controller. If we just go back a step and we go to the auto mains failure controllers, we've got Similar module, but this time we call it the 7320, whereas the one module we were looking at was the 7310. And the 20 dictates that it's an auto mains failure controller module. So what that means is, if we just look on the fascia here, we can see over the left-hand side, we've got a mains symbol just up here. And you can hopefully see that on the blow up there. And when the mains is available, this LED light is lit. And this is the mains breaker here. So when the mains breaker is closed, you can assume that the mains is providing power to the building load. So this is the building load up here. And then should the mains actually fail, then the mains breaker will open and the generator will be instructed to start. The generator will then start and it will become available. So this LED will light here, and then this breaker will close, and then it will provide power to the site. Okay. So this has got a little bit, few more features in compared to the 10. Essentially, it's monitoring the mains, whereas a 10 is not monitoring the mains. It's just a standalone genset controller. So obviously, there's a small difference in price, but in terms of actual control and generator, it's the same thing. So if we just scroll around to the back here, if we look at the back of this one, we've got voltage monitoring for V1, which is the generator, and then V2, which is the actual building, mains, the mains monitor as well. So if the voltage drops off at here, the generator will automatically start. So if we just go back to the 10 and go to the reverse of the 10, we can see on this one, it's very similar looking, but look, there's no monitoring on V2, there's no voltage monitoring. So I suppose the next question really that I think people will probably want to know is, can I use an AMF controller as an auto start controller? Yes, you can. Okay, you can just, by accessing the controller with a laptop, you can turn the mains monitoring off and just use it as standalone generator controller. So you'll often see higher sets that get used in different applications. They'll be used as an auto start controller and as a mains failure controller, and just depending on which application they're in, they might turn off the mains monitoring. The confusion comes if someone goes on site who's not perhaps familiar with Deepsea or familiar with the genset, and they said, "Oh, I've looked at the panel here and it says that the mains has failed, but we've not got mains on site." Well, that's because it's the controller that can do both things, but at that particular point, it's just been used as a standalone generator controller. So it all depends on your application, really. So this is the Genset range, and you can see there's a wide variety of genset controllers. And these all reflect customer requirements, you know, what it is they actually need from the genset, how much money they want to spend, what kind of budget they have, and features, etc., that they want. So if we just look at the top of the range, I would say non-load sharing controller. I'll explain a little bit about load sharing in a minute. If we look at this one here, on the back of this controller, we have a USB port, which is what you'd use to program the controller. We also have an Ethernet port, which means you can connect the controller to a network, so a computer network or a business management system. Excuse me. And we also have a USB socket there, so you can put a USB stick in and use the module as like a kind of like a data logger. So you might want to log how often the engine's starting, how much fuel you're using. You can put a USB stick in there and record that. Then over on the left-hand side here, we've got an RS485 port. So if you want to put it onto RS485, onto a different kind of business management system, similar to Ethernet, you can do that. And also a 232 port as well. So it gives you more flexibility. If you go back down the range, go down to the, say, the 6120 Mark III, this is a fairly new controller actually. We can see here we just have a USB port. Okay, there's no facility for plugging in any other type of comms port on the back there. So that's the kind of things you get as you go up the range. And if we go further down the range, we've also got like the 4520, obviously a smaller, much smaller controller. Just has a USB socket on the back. Different fascia, limited amount of buttons, and everything's it's a combination of text and icon based. So it just kind of squeezes everything into a smaller package, really. Obviously, these things tend to be purchased on, you know, what size of generator you've got. It kind of dictates what kind of controller you've got. So over on the right-hand side here, we've also got what's called a load sharing and synchronizing control modules. And these are kind of I wouldn't say a different market, but they're like a step up from your standard generator controllers. So if you don't know what synchronizing or load sharing is, really, I'll kind of explain very briefly what that means. If you've got a couple of generators, say you've got 4 generators and 1 building load, you might want all those generators to run together and what we call synchronize, so they all share the load together and work together to control the load. So that's what we call load sharing. So these generators would synchronize with each other. So if you imagine a car going up a hill, you want both cars alongside each other, locked together. That's kind of what synchronizing is in a very crude term. So the controllers would synchronize together, and then once they're locked together, they would essentially share the load, whether they're towing something or pushing something together. So that's what synchronizing and load sharing is. We've got training courses on that coming up as well. Similar kind of principle. We've got this one here, 8610 Mark II. This is probably the most common controller we do for synchronizing and load sharing. Just click on this one here. This starts and it synchronizes with whatever's on the load, closes its breaker, and then it will load share with other 8610s. If we look at an 8620, very similar principle, but this just synchronizes and load shares with one main supply. So imagine you've got a building and the load on the building, the actual building itself, has got such a high load that the mains can't support it. So if the building load gets too high, the mains breaker might trip, or there might be problems further back up the main supply. What you may need to do is bring a genset in, synchronize with the mains, and then load share with the mains, and then assist the mains in powering the building. So that's an application where you use an 8620 Mark II. And again, it might be a case that it's on a remote on a higher set or a standalone set, and actually what you need to do is you need to be flexible. You want to use it as an 8610 or as an 8620, so mains failure or just standalone genset control, and the 8620 Mark II can do that as well. And then there's different variations within the range on the same theme. So we've got the 8920, which is actually a new module that's just come out. Very similar, but it has a nice color screen, and it's a combination of icons and text as well. So you can make this a 10 or a 20, and obviously when you make it a 10 or a 20, the screen changes. But very similar principle on the rear, just things are just laid out a little bit more differently. Same kind of specification. You've got your USB port, your Ethernet port. You generally find all these extra comms ports on the more high-end controllers. So that's the Genset range. Obviously, there's various other add-on products from that. We also make AVRs, which stands for automatic voltage regulators. Analog voltage regulators. We make controllers for DC generators. So most generators these days are AC, but there are occasional ones where you need DC generators, for example, charging batteries, things like that. And we also make remote configurations and overview options as well. So it might be that you've got a bank of 8610s, or you might even have a bank of 7310s, and you want to view them all on one screen. So you'd probably buy something like our overview screen here, and you can view them all on here. Little thing, all extra modules really added on from within the Genset range. So that's the Genset range. Sorry, I've skipped a bit quickly there, jumping through the website. So that's the Genset range. And then if we just go back, let's go to the products again, and let's talk about the ATS range. So ATS stands for Auto Transfer Switch, and this allows you to transfer the load between 2 supplies. And we refer to those supplies as S1 and S2. So if I just click on this DSE 335, this is the top of the range ATS we make. We manufacture here at Deepsea. So S1 is supply 1 and S2 is supply 2. So what you might see is supply 1 is maybe the main supply, and supply 2 would be a generator, okay? Or it might be 2 generators or 3 generators, but all supplying that one supply. So when that supply becomes available, it closes its breaker and transfers a load from S1 to S2. It could also be the other way around. S2 could be the mains, S1 could be the genset. Or it could even be S1 is one main supply and S2 is another main supply. The thing with the 335, it's not a genset controller, it's an ATS controller, so it's controlling a transfer switch. So it might be the case that for a large building or a large application, you've got what's called a transfer room where all the opening and closing of the breakers take place. And then in another room, remote from the ATS room, you might have all the generators. So you'd have what we call a generator house. You might have 3 or 4 generators in there, and that's where all the generator controllers are. So that's why you would have an ATS. You'd have an ATS in one room and then a genset controller in the other room. And again, it's a variation on the same theme, but as you go down the range, you get less and less functionality. You lose your buttons, etc., and you end up with the 327, which is this one's not configurable by configuration suite. It's just a very basic to supply 1, supply 2. When supply 1 becomes unavailable, it will switch to supply 2, and it will just basically send out a command to open and close breakers. So very simple. Okay, I'm just going to stop there and see how things are looking on the questions. So it's a good question here. So will you show us how to turn off the mains monitoring feature on a laptop so that generator can be started from a remote signal? Absolutely, yeah. We're going to come to that actually when I start talking about configuration suite. So I'll just keep moving forwards and explaining a bit more about the course, a little bit more about our range, and then we'll come to that when we talk about config suite. So have a quick look at a few of the others here. Yeah, some of these questions really are more for the advanced courses that's coming up next week. Although one here, I want to find out if this course is getting recorded. Yes, this course is getting recorded, and then what we will do is we will edit it and then we'll release it as a downloadable webinar. But if you want to drop us an email requesting it, that's fine. It generally takes us a week or two just to get the, obviously there's bound to be a few mistakes. We like to just tidy it up a little bit and smooth out the rough edges, and then we'll if you email it as on request, we will send you the download link. But it won't be available immediately, so just give us a week or two while we get that sorted out. Okay, so that's the ATS range. I'll keep going through the product range. Let's talk about the power range now. So the power range are essentially battery chargers, but a battery charger is essentially a clever power supply if you're looking at it in very simple terms. So we make 12 and 24 volt battery chargers. So if we just click on a 24 volt battery charger, we've got a wide range of chargers, all to suit different applications. Okay, so we've got, for example, one here. This is a 30 amp charger. So this will power up this will charge a very large battery, and then we've also got a little 5 amp battery charger. So this is something like, for example, on your car. This battery charger would be fine for most modern car engines. A battery charger is between sort of 5 and 10 amps is enough for a medium-sized car. But you'll notice here we've got what we call intelligent battery chargers, and then ones that are basically non-intelligent. So an intelligent battery charger, because you can configure it to specifically suit that battery. So every battery you buy is a little bit different to other batteries. They all have their own what we call charging curve. So as the voltage drops on the battery needs to be charged. There's limits on how much current the battery can pull, how much voltage, the maximum voltage that can be put into the battery to charge it, how often it should be discharged, what the discharge rate of it, and what the amp hour rating of the battery is. And that's the key thing to remember here. So if you buy a battery, typical car battery, for example, will be something like 50 AH. And what that means, it can stand with 50 amps over a period of 1 hour. So that's what's called the AH rating. So you would the sort of loose industry standard is rate your charger to be 10% of your AH rating. So if you buy a battery that's 75 AH, you'd buy a charger that's rated at a maximum 7.5 amps, because if you overcharge a battery, you will damage it. So most car batteries I've come across tend to be between 50 and 100 AH rated. So that means they normally need between a 5 and a 10 amp battery charger to charge them. If you get a smaller battery charger, that's fine. If it's a 100 AH rating battery, you don't need to have a 10 amp charger. You can have a 3 amp charger if you want. It'll just take longer to charge because maximum current it will give out is 3 amps. And that's where you would buy a high-end charger like ours, because we limit the amount of current, and we had protection in it as well, so that we don't burn the charger out by basically asking it to produce as much current as possible. We can limit the amount of current we produce. We can also we can pulse the battery. We can add soft starts. So if the battery's been badly discharged, if you were just to plug on your a power supply onto that charger to charge it, you'd probably knock the charger out. You might damage it, and you'd probably damage the battery as well, because the plates inside the battery would probably warp. So that's why you have an intelligent charger. So it detects what state the battery's in and gradually brings it back to life by pulsing it or having a kind of a soft start to the current output. So that's the kind of difference between between a standard charger and an intelligent charger. You can really customize it to suit your battery. You can also use the intelligent charger to test the battery every so often. So it would deliberately allow the battery to discharge, monitor how quickly it discharges, and then that would give an indication of what kind of condition the battery's in. And what you find on gensets is people buy a battery charger, and the battery itself provides power to the Deepsea controller, which in turn uses power. So you have to keep the battery powered. So the battery acts as not just to start the engine, but also as a power supply as well. So you have to keep the battery topped up. So that's the charger range. And the final range, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because this is for another day, but just to keep you familiar really, is the control range. Excuse me. So in this range here, we have what we call the off-highway range. So these are basically industrial, well, a combination firstly of industrial PLCs that you'd find like on cranes and, like I said, fire trucks, tipper trucks. It doesn't have to be something that's mechanically moving. It can be anything, you know, fish farms, things like that. Anything that just needs inputs and outputs, essentially, this is what you'd use the one of our M series products for. And then we also have the E series range as well, which are a range of engine controllers. So these are engine only controllers. So we talked about genset controllers. So genset, which is made up of an engine and an alternator on the end, whereas an engine only controller doesn't have the alternator element. It might have a pump set on there, or it might have a dredger pump or a stone crusher or something like that. That's where you'd buy an engine only controller. And then within our E series controllers, we've added in special functionality for like auto filling. You might be pumping dredging a field or something like that, or filling up a tank. So you've got a fill point and a stop point. Or you might be crushing rocks, so you might want to know the pressure of the tools under when it's crushing and limit that through our controller. Wide range of applications, but that's what the E series is for. So we call that the off-highway sector. Okay, so that's enough about. One final thing actually. I'm jumping ahead there. I do apologise. If we just go back to our mains fairly controllers. From a support point of view, you know a little bit about the products, but where do you get all the technical literature from it? Well, that's all on the website as well. And once you've registered, you'll find things like the installation instructions. So if I just open this up now, this is just a black and white document that comes in the box with the controller. And it just details the wiring, how to wire the controller in, what all the pinouts mean. If I just zoom in a little bit there. So if you just zoom in there, you can see all the numbers on here. These all relate to the back of the controller. It tells you how to make small changes to the controller. Perhaps you might want to change alarm levels or make some changes to the controller contrast and things like that. This just gives you instructions on how to do that from the front panel. So you could press and hold certain buttons and then make changes to the controller. And there's a list here of items you can change via the front panel. So we call this the front panel editor. And then when the engine is running, we have what's called the running editor. So you can make changes to the engine whilst it's running. So some things you can only do when the engine's in stop mode, some things you can only do when the engine is actually running. So that's what we call the front panel and the running editor. We've also got the operator's manual, obviously a very useful document. Now the thing I should point out at this point is that all this documentation is actually managed by the technical support team. So every single manual you see on our website is written by one of the technical support team. So if you have any questions or the manual's not clear, you can give us a call and you can be assured that we've actually written the manual. And we actually have a very a very, I wouldn't say strict, but we have a quite a well locked down procedure in how these manuals are written. So we write this manual and we then pass it to our testing and approval department, who then test what we've written in the manual to what the product actually does, and make sure that it's clear in the manual what the feature is referring to and how it actually works. So we don't just write a manual for the sake of writing a manual. We really do put a lot of effort into getting these manuals right, so that you, the customer, have a good experience of using our products. So please do take the time to read the manuals, because there's a lot of information in here. Now, this is the operator manual, and the operator manual is really exactly that. It's the kind of manual that the operator, the guy using the generator, needs to follow. So it explains things, how the buttons work, what the front panel does. If you're going to be wiring in inputs and outputs, what the rating is of those inputs and outputs, what all the connectors mean on the back of the socket. It gives you the specifications, like the dimensions, the panel cutout, the weight, standard applications, what standards the controller meets. So it's really how to use the controller. We also have what's called the PC software manual. So the PC software manual is a manual that you would download if you want to make changes to the controller. So if you're an OEM or you're installing a generator on site, you're going to want to make changes to the controller to suit your genset. So when we ship our controllers, they're all shipped with a default configuration filing. And that's because our controller is designed to work with any kind of genset, okay, any manufacturer of genset. It doesn't matter what the engine manufacturer is, what the alternator manufacturer is. Our controller should work with any kind of engine. But obviously, you're going to need to make changes to it. And you can't make all the changes by just pressing and holding buttons on the front panel. It's much easier to connect your laptop to the controller and make changes using Configuration Suite, which we're going to come on to very shortly. If I just open up a software manual here. This manual explains how to actually configure the controller using Configuration Suite. So these are all the menus in Configuration Suite. It explains what they all mean, and basically every single section is documented on how to make changes. So, for example, this miscellaneous section here, it goes through all these items and tells you what they all mean and what they actually do. So when you tick them and untick them, what it actually, in real world, what it means. From my point of view, obviously I answer the phone all day. If you're going to go to site to work on a Deepsea product, unless it's a very basic change, always take a laptop, okay? Make sure you've got Configuration Suite on your laptop and take your laptop to site. You should see your laptop as a socket set, in effect, or as a multimeter. It's as important as that. It's a key tool. So if you're going to go to site or you're new to Deepsea, get Configuration Suite on your laptop and get using it. So going back to the website, we've talked about installation instructions, manuals, software manuals. I'm just going to jump over the product change notification. Don't need to look at that at the moment. The final section I'll show you is the additional documents section. So as well as manuals, we also write training documents. Okay, so it's sometimes difficult when you're writing a manual to tie everything in together. So if you're wiring in a sensor, for example, and it's a certain type of sensor, we can't really document that in the manual. We can just tell you what the specification is on the actual on the input of that sensor. So for that reason, we've got a number of training documents. So for example, recommended practices for wiring resistive sensors. Let me just open this one up here. These are just short documents, maybe 2 or 3 pages long, just explaining how to do specific things in more detail. Because if we put these in the manual, you'd end up with a manual that's like 1,000 pages long, and no one's going to really want to read through that. So recommended practices for wiring resistive sensors just tells you how to wire a sensor. And it gives you an example of common faults. So look, it mentions here, failed to stop an oil pressure sensor. So on a generator, it's difficult sometimes to know actually if the engine's running, believe it or not. Because on a car, you're moving. On a generator, it makes noise. But if you're not on site or the controller's well away from the generator, you don't actually know if it's running. So you have indications of whether the engine's actually running, and that can be oil pressure, frequency, engine speed. So if the oil pressure is stuck on a generator, so it's high oil pressure, that indicates that the engine's running, but it might be the case that the sensor's failed and it's just stuck. So it's actually stuck at, say, 10 bar, makes you think the engine's running when it's actually in fact not, and that gives you what's called a fail to stop alarm. Just explains a little bit more detail about that. The great thing with this is, if you're new to the genset industry, or you're an apprentice, or you're just getting started out, or you just want to learn a little bit more, I can't tell you how important these training documents are, because, you know, obviously when I started at Deepsea, these documents were a great help to me, and they're a great help to anyone who's just coming into the industry. So please, you know, if you're doing a degree or you're doing a training course or anything like that, take the time to read these documents, because you'll find a lot of useful information out in there. We really have put a lot of time and effort into it. Obviously, as times go on, I think people now, they want to see more videos, and we're moving into that as well. I like both aspects of it, really. I like to have the document, and I like to have the video as well. When you're on site, sometimes it's nicer to actually look at a document than it is to sit there looking at your phone. So yeah, we've got a huge range of training documents. Okay, so I'm just going to stop at that point and see how things are looking. It's nice to see that the attendance is actually going up as the course goes on. So that means that people are still joining the course, which is fantastic. Could I just get a quick hand raise to make sure everyone's still with me so far? Great stuff. Okay, fantastic. Let's go lower all those hands there. Okay, I'll just see if there's any good questions come in. So yeah, some of these questions actually, I'm going to keep moving on. No, there's one question which I'll just answer. What does MK2 stand for? Okay, so we have we call Mark 1 and Mark 2 controllers, and you'll see this across Mark 3, etc. They're just variations of that controller, but it means that there's been a significant change to the hardware. So, for example, 7310, we've got 7320 here, sorry, Mark 2. Previously, we had the 7320 Mark 1, which looks slightly different, and the hardware inside the controller is different as well. So as times go by, components are improved. For example, the screens are improved. You know, all the components inside the controller change, and they're improved. We reach a point where we say, actually, we're going to bring out a new version of this controller, and the changes are so significant that it's actually not the same thing. Inside, it's different. Everything's changed. So we're going to revise the controller and call it a Mark II, and we'll relaunch it, and we'll relaunch it as the Mark II, so it's a better product. Now, what you'll find when you work with Deepsea is that you're going to come across a lot of our older controllers, and you know, we've been making controllers since the early 80s, and we still get people ring us up now asking for technical literature or assistance on a controller that was made in the late 80s. It's amazing, really. And for that reason, we actually still keep a lot of this information on the website. You just have to scroll down to the bottom. And if we just go, for example, to the Genset non-standard obsolete, it's a little bit hidden. You'll find all our older controllers in here as well, and information on them. So if I just go down there to the 7310 Mark II, sorry, 7310 Mark 1, there we are, look. It's DSE 7310. The fascia is slightly different. Looks very similar, but it is actually different. And then we also have the operator's manual instructions installations as well. So if you want to get the wiring diagram, for example, you can get that still on the website. We don't call it the Mark 1 because we never intended on making a Mark 2. Okay, it just happened over time. And you'll find this across our range. I mean, when you ring us up and you ask us, and I'll say, what controller have you got? If it's a Mark 2, in fact, if I just go back here to the DSE product range, if you actually look on the fascia, look, it actually says there, DSE 7320 Mark II. And normally, I'm not sure if it's in this image, yeah, there's a sticker on the rear of the controller as well, with that indication on as well. So I'll just say, if you have a look at the back of the controller, tell me if it's a Mark 1 or a Mark II. And actually, if you look along the fascia, the Mark IIs tend to not have the plastic bar going across as well. So it's a little bit more rounded on the edges, and the colouring is a little bit different as well. And that can be enough sometimes for me to identify it. You'd be surprised how many times people ring up and don't really know what control they've got. And we have to do a bit of guesswork to figure out what it actually they've got first of all. Okay, so that's enough about the products. The rest of these questions that have come in, I'm going to hopefully answer them anyway. by going through Config Suite. So, Configuration Suite, what is it? Well, first of all, you're going to need to download it. So, if you click on any of our modules, if you just click on the 7410 Mark II, for example, if you go to the PC software section here, you can download the software from here. Okay, so it's called DSE Configuration Suite Software Installer. Do apologize. If you just click download, you can download that software onto your PC. And then once it's on your PC, you need to install it and run the software. Now, something just to make you aware of, if you've got a virus checker on your PC or you've got strict firewall restrictions, you may have issues downloading it. If you're part of a company and it's a company laptop, it's almost guaranteed there'll be some restrictions on there to restrict downloading. So you may need to contact your IT department just to say, hey, look, I want to download a configuration suite. Can you turn off the firewall temporarily, or can you just allow this product to be downloaded just so I get it on my PC, and then you can put the restrictions back on. So once you've downloaded it and opened it, this is what you're going to see. I can drag this up now. This is Config Suite. Okay, now I'm aware that we're coming up to 11 o'clock, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. So we're just going to go through very briefly how Configuration Suite works. So up the top here, well, you open Configuration Suite, and this is what you're going to see. And you can then decide what you want to do. So you can either go File, and New, and open a new configuration file. Okay, and there's a list of all our products in here. And this is really good if you just want to open, say, for example, 7310 Mark II. Just click that there. That's now going to open this file. If you just want to know what the controller does and get an idea of specifications, Config Suite is a great place to start. So even if you've not purchased a Deepsea product, but you want to buy a Deepsea product, but you don't know which one to buy, or you want a specific feature and you want to know how it works, download Configurations file Suite, open up the file, and then down the left-hand side here, we have all the configuration settings of that controller. So if we just go to generator, for example, common question I get asked, can the generator do 3-phase and single-phase? Because sometimes I'm going to be doing 3-phase with it, sometimes I'm going to be doing single-phase. Yes, it can. Click generator options, AC system. You can then select 3-phase 4-wire, single-phase 2-wire, etc. You can select whichever topology you want. Essentially, you configure your controller to suit your application. Another common question here, and I can see one's coming on the Q&A page. If we just open up a 7320, someone's saying, can I make a 20 into a 10? You can't make it into a 10 because that would mean changing the fascia. But what you can do is you can turn off the mains monitoring, and I'll just show you how to do that as well. Let that load up. So if we just go to generator and mains options, you just turn off the mains failure detection, okay, and that turns that off the controller then. So what will happen then is the mains LED and the breaker LED will be lit, and anything that goes on with the mains will just be ignored. Okay, so you're turning off the mains detection. Okay, so let's have a bit more of a run round of what Configuration Suite, what it actually does. So down the left-hand side here is all about configuring your controllers, making changes to your controllers. Down here is all about what's going on with that controller at the moment. We call that the SCADA page. Okay, so if I just click the arrow and then click it again, it's actually going to connect to my controller here. So it's connected to my controller. Look, it's connected over USB, and that's the module ID. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. If we just go to engine, for example, it's now telling me that the engine coolant temperature is 21 degrees. That's the plant battery voltage, and that's the speed. If I was to start the engine now, and if I go to, for example, there we are, look, the speed's now going up, and it's now running at 1500 RPM. So if you're on site, you're doing live fault finding, this is where you do it. You'd run the engine, and you see what it's actually doing. You might want to check your voltages or your oil pressure, coolant temperature, things like that. You can do all that from here. You can also, if you don't want to keep going and pressing buttons, if you click on the mimic, you can actually stop the generator. So this is just basically what's going on in the generator. Press the stop button and the generator will stop. We're going to run through the buttons at the end of the course, what they all mean. And we'll just keep going through config suite for now. So that's config, that's where you make all your changes. And Scada is where you basically view all those changes and you view anything that's happening live, so happening right now. So let's just talk about how you want to make, how we would actually go to site and make changes. So let's just imagine we've arrived on site and I want to check the scheduler on my controller. Perhaps I want to turn the scheduler on. So the first thing we do is arrive on site, we're going to plug our USB lead in. Okay, so by default, the module is connected via USB. So it says here connect via USB. If you want to connect via Ethernet, you can do, or via 232.485, you can do, or via CAN as well, by using a PCAN adapter. But for the most part, I would say 90% of our customers connect via USB, and that's what it's set to by default. So we're going to connect via USB. So turn up on our site, plug our printer lead in. So you just need a USB printer lead. We call it or A to B lead, something like that. That's what various names for it. I think the proper title is A to B. You can buy them anywhere. You know, even a supermarket sells them. So they're off the shelf. The other thing I would recommend is buy a decent quality one. And if you can, buy the USB leads that come with what we call the Ferrite Chokes. It's like a choke that goes around the USB lead, and it just reduces the amount of electrical interference. Obviously, generators by their very nature are going to be working in environments where the electrical interference is going to be high. So try and get a decent quality lead and keep the length as short as possible. Okay, so we'll just plug that in there now. You have my laptop ping there. And if you look up on the top right-hand side here, it's just told me what I've connected to. It's told me I've connected to a DSE 8610 Mark II. It's firmware version 7. A little bit on that in shortly. And then in there is a number, and that number is what we call the USB ID number, and that's totally unique to your genset. Okay, it's completely unique to your controller. So I'm connected to it, and now I need to read the configuration file. So up on the right-hand side here, I just select Read from Module, and that will now read from my controller. So it's saying this file that's currently open has been modified. Do I want to save any changes? Well, no, I don't. So I just click no. And now it's going to read from my controller. So it takes a little bit of time. Now this controller here, this 8610 is actually one of our top controllers. So this is the one that takes the longest to read. And you can see there, it's still, you know, 10, 15 seconds and we're done. So I like that process. Okay, so that's now pulled in that information. And down here is a configuration of this controller. Okay, so if I want to change, for example, the scheduler. So if we just click on scheduler and schedule options, I'm going to enable the exercise scheduler. Now, what that means is that the generator will, or if you want a generator to say on a Monday morning, you might want the generator to start and run for an hour just to make sure that everything's okay. All right, so you just want it to run for an hour. So if you go to schedule options, exercise scheduler, bank one, because there's two lots of banks. So I say Monday, I want it to run offload, but I could even say I want it to run onload, or I could say I want it to actually not run at all. So for example, if someone's going in to clean the generator, or they're going to carry out maintenance checks, perhaps check the oil level, check for any leaks and stuff like that, then you might not want the generator starting up because it's obviously a safety hazard. So you might want to put in there auto start inhibit so the generator can't actually be started. But for me, for my purpose, I'm going to say I want it to start offload. And I want it to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I want it to run for 1 hour. Okay, so that now means the generator is going to start and run for 1 hour on a Monday morning at 8 o'clock. So once I've done that, I just go back up here and click Write to Module. I turned off to synchronizing, but don't worry about that. So now it's saying, do I want to write this configuration file? Yes. So that will now write the configuration file. Now you can read from the controller whenever you like. So you can read from the controller when it's running if you want, but you can't write to the controller unless it's actually in stop mode, because you're going to be basically actually almost power cycles the controller. It stops the controller and writes all this information back to it. So that's now written to the controller, and I've made my changes there. So now on a Monday morning, the generator is going to start and run. Okay. So it might be the case that you want to save that file. So you go File, Save, or Save As and give it a name. I always recommend to customers, when you get on site, as soon as you're on site, before you make any changes, read from the controller and save the file, okay? Because it's very, very easy to make changes and then go, you know what, I don't know what I've changed, I've lost track of what I've done, I just want to go back to the beginning. So I always recommend to customers, save the file, okay? I can't stress this enough, because if you accidentally open any of these files, these are all default files that your controller leaves the factory with. So if anyone ever says to you, I just want to put the controller back on its default settings, you can open one of these files and write them to the controller. But it's very easy to get confused and write a default file to your controller. Okay, and we have no record of any changes been made to a controller once it's left the factory. We know what it's left the factory with. After that, we've no idea what changes have been made. So please, please, please save your configuration file. So that's an example of just a small change you can do. Now, if you look down here, we can see in the SCADA section, the little link here has actually been broken. So every time you disconnect and reconnect your USB connection, that actually breaks and you have to manually reconnect it. That's just to reduce the speed. That's just to reduce the load on the USB port when you write changes. So if you just click the up arrow and then click the down arrow, it will just reconnect. And there's other reasons for that as well. It might be the case that you've connected to a number of controllers and you want to just click the drop down here and select other controllers and then select the SCADA pages for that controller. So I've now changed my controller. So another good example where you might use SCADA, if we just click on maintenance and then maintenance alarm reset, it's quite common for customers to have a maintenance alarm on your controller. So you'd configure your maintenance alarm in here. This is where you make your changes to your maintenance alarm. So every 300 hours, a maintenance alarm is going to pop up. It's going to give me a warning, or it might come on a date as well. So it's going to enable from 1 month from the date that this alarm's been set. If you're going to maintenance alarm, someone might go on site and they might want to reset the alarm. Perhaps they've done a service on it, or they've gone to check everything over. Then they're going to want to reset the alarm. You can do this from the front panel, or you can turn that feature off and you insist that it has to be done from a laptop. And that's quite common because it means that the guy on site, there's no temptation for someone on site just to go and press the stop button and reset the alarm. Instead, someone's going to go to site who's competent, who understands what the maintenance alarm means. It's going to take a laptop and reset the alarm. So you just go to SCADA, maintenance alarm reset, and then press reset, and that puts the alarm back to 300 hours. Okay, it's all dependent on what you want to do. So that's what SCADA is actually for. That's another good example of SCADA. Another section of SCADA which I'd like to show you, which we get a lot of calls about, you can actually put a PIN code on the module, and that PIN code will stop the customer or stop the end user making any changes to the controller without having access to that PIN code. Very common feature. So this means only authorized people can go to site and make changes. The thing to make you aware of is if you put a PIN code on there and you forget the PIN code, we at Deepsea have no way of knowing what the PIN code will be, and there is no way of resetting the PIN code unless you return the controller to us. Okay, so you must return the controller to us. If you've forgot the PIN code, you don't know what it is, it's going to have to come back, and we actually have to desolder some items on the back of the controller and replace them to reset the PIN code. So it's not an easy task. So please, if you're going to put a PIN code in it, make sure you remember it, or you make a note of it in a safe location. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much more into Config Suite. I think the final thing I'm just going to show you is what the actual buttons do. It's a very common question: is what do the actual buttons do? So if we go back to the Mimic, we've got the stop button here. Okay, puts the controller in stop mode. Whenever it's in stop mode, can't start the generator. Makes sense? So if someone has a remote input to the controller and wants to start the generator, either via a key switch or a switch in another room, if it's in stop mode, the generator won't start. Okay, and I'm going to skip along to auto mode now. If you're in auto mode, okay, the generator won't start unless it either receives a remote command, so via a digital input telling it to start, or a mains failure occurs. Okay, so this is an 8610, so there's no mains failure protection on it. So the only reason this generator would start would be if someone flicks the switch remotely, or the scheduler kicks in. You know, we configured the scheduler earlier. If that kicks in, you know, it's Monday morning 8 o'clock, the generator will automatically start. So that's auto mode. Manual mode means that you can manually start the generator. Okay, so if you put it in manual mode, you can then press the start button, and that will start the generator. And if you look up here, look, this LED becomes lit. Okay, so it's now running. It's telling me the status. So it's running and it's offload. If I want to close the breaker, I think it will actually shut down, but I'll show you anyway. I press this button here. It's going to try and close the breaker. Unfortunately, it's failed to close. This is actually running on my desk here. I've not got a breaker wired in at the moment. So the generator will now stop and it will give me an alarm. Okay. If I was to close the breaker, I'd press that button there. And if I want to open the breaker, I'd press this button here. Okay. So that's what these buttons do along the bottom. Now you'll notice here, there's actually a blank. And I'll just show you on the website what that blank is for. Don't forget, there's also a search function. So the button here that's blank is actually only in use on an 8620. Okay, so this is the 8620 up here, and this is the button here. Okay, so what this button does is this is what's called a test button. So if you press the test button and then press the engine start button, what will happen is the engine will start, and depending on what that's configured to, you can configure that to be whatever you want. The generator will start and run, or it will start and then automatically go on load and transfer the load. The reason we have that is if you've got a site where you've got a long-term application, you probably don't want people to be pressing the open and close breaker buttons all the time. It's probably safer just to say, press the test on load button, press the green button, the generator will start and then go on load. You don't need to do anything. Okay, and then when you're finished, you just take it out of test on load. So you put it back into manual mode or back into auto mode, the generator will go off load. So it keeps it simple. It's primarily designed really for, you know, a maintenance guy, like a caretaker. Perhaps he's not a generator specialist or a generator engineer, but his job is just to make sure the generator runs. It's just a nice way of saying, rather than pressing the stop button, the green button, the breaker close button, the breaker open button, putting it back in stop mode, you kind of simplify it by using the test button. And on the 8610, because it's not a 20, it doesn't have the unload, the test button, you can just leave that button blank, but you can actually utilize that button for other things. You can use it in what's called the modules inbuilt PLC, and you can use that button for whatever you want. Okay, so that's what the buttons do. One final thing, the front panel editor. This is difficult to show you without really being physically in person. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to try and use my webcam for this just to show you how it works, but it might be a bit tricky. Let's just have a quick go. Okay, can you all see me there? Can I just get a hand raised? Would that be okay? Okay, great stuff. Fantastic. Yep, brilliant. Right, I'm just going to switch my camera around. I'm just going to show you how to access the front panel editor. Okay. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. So to access the front panel editor, you must be in stop mode. So I'm in stop mode here. And all you do is you press and hold the tick button, the stop button, and the tick button together, like so. Okay, and then we can see here, we've accessed the front panel editor. If I want to make any changes, like to the contrast, things like that, I can just press an up and down key here, and that will make changes. And scroll through, so we go to the generator page. Perhaps I might want to change the topology, so at the minute they can say single phase 2-wire. If I press the tick button, I can change that to 3-phase 4-wire, and then press the tick button. Once I've finished, all I do is press and hold the tick button. And it goes back to the main page. Okay, so while we're here, I'll just run you through the menus. So at the minute we've got the status page, so it's just saying the generator is at rest at the moment. If I go to the engine page, it's telling me what the engine is doing. So the engine is not running at the moment. In fact, I'll start it and run it, and you can see that going up. an alarm to clear first of all. So the engine should shortly be running. Yeah, there we go. So that's now running at 1500 RPM. And if I navigate through here, I can see the oil pressure, coolant temperature, battery voltage, etc. Next page, see if there's any alarms. So this is, you know, if you ring up and you've got a problem, or the generator keeps shutting down, I don't know why. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, can you go to the alarms page and tell me what alarm you're seeing? Engine diagnostic trouble codes, event log, very useful. Very useful for fault finding. If you scroll through here, you can see what's been going on with the generator, when it started, when it stopped, any alarms that have come up. A common question we get asked is, can you wipe the module's event log? The answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because if people can wipe the event log, it becomes extremely difficult to fault find. And then you don't actually know what's going on with the module, and you don't know what it's been doing. And it's also a nice way of hiding someone's mistake. So you can't wipe the event log. Communications, this is quite useful if you're going to be putting a system onto a BMS. Just a quick way you can see if you're going to connect an RS232, that's the baud rate and that's the ID. And it's the same thing for RS232, RS485, it tells me the quality, whether USB is connected. Look, link quality 100%, RX rate 73. So it's telling me how good the connection is. It's connected to a gateway at the moment, this controller. Scheduler, you can actually make changes to the scheduler via the front panel. But like I've said previously, it's a lot easier doing it with a laptop. PLC, if you're using any PLC, that's a conversation for another day. And then miscellaneous things. If you've got a memory stick in there, you can say, okay, I'm logging to a memory stick. If you want to eject it, you can just press the tick button and eject it from here. And then finally, the about page. And this leads me on nicely to the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is updating the module's firmware. So you can see here, this is telling me that it's an 8610. I can't really see that camera very well, actually. It's an 8610. It's version 7.7, and that's the USB ID there. Okay, so I'm going to actually switch the camera off now and go back to my screen and just talk a little bit about updating the firmware. So did everyone follow that so far? Was that okay for everyone? Can I just get a hand raise? Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Okay, I'm just going to lower all those hands now. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about before we move on to any questions and answers is updating the module's firmware. So if I just stop this controller. Now, when you buy our controller, it's shipped with what we consider the latest firmware installed. And as time goes by, we add new features in, we develop our products further, and you have to update the firmware if you want access to those features. Now, some customers like to just install the product on site, approve it all. If it works, great. But they'll never need to update the firmware. They never bother. It's not a total requirement. You have to update the firmware. But I recommend you do, because as time goes by, we fix things, we change the way things work, we improve things. So if you want to keep up to speed, update the firmware. Now, first of all, you're probably thinking, well, how do I get these firmware files? Well, if you just go to the help section and check for updates, what that will do is Config Suite will connect to our servers, and it will say to our servers, I've got an 8610 installed on my Config Suite. Are there any new updates for it? And our servers will say, yes, there's some updates. Here you are. You need to download them and update Config Suite. Okay. And it also, we make changes to Config Suite as well. We can make small changes as well to Config Suite. So I always recommend that you let Config Suite update if it's required and keep up to speed with the latest features. Config Suite itself will automatically update. It will just, every time you open it, it will connect to our server and say, hey, I've connected to the server. We need, via the internet, we need to, your Config Suite's out of date, you need to update. If you've got a firewall on your PC or anything like that, then it may be that you're going to miss those updates. So it might be periodically worthwhile when you get into the office and you're on a secure connection, saying to your IT department, can I just get my Config Suite to check for updates? And if needs be, I'll update it. Okay, so first of all, make sure you've got the latest version of Config Suite. And if you click the About page, if you look at this number here, this is how I know if you've got the latest version of Config Suite. So if you ring me up and you say, oh, I've not got this file off, I'm having problems, I'll say, well, what version of Config Suite have you got? And that's the number I will ask you for. Okay, so this is 2020.44. Okay, kind of makes sort of sense, really. So how do we update the Config Suite? I'll show you. So connected to the controller, we've read from the controller, we've saved the file. I've not actually saved the file, but always save the file. Okay, again, I can't stress this enough, how important it is to save the file. Okay, if we go to Tools and Update Firmware, and then it says the wizard will guide you through the firmware update process. Now at this point, I'd like to point out there is a video on YouTube showing you how to do this, but I'll go through it again as well. And whilst it's updating, I'll try and answer some questions because it can take a bit of time. So click Next, and then we've got select device type, USB. So we're connected via USB. Select Next, and it's saying remove the cable from the module. Okay, so you can see that the connection has gone up there. My buttons have grayed out in the background, and turn the module off. Okay, so I've done that. Select Next, then select the file, update file. So if I just select Browse, I'm then going to find the file I want. So I've got an 8610 Mark II. And if I just scroll through here, here we are, look, 86XX MK2. That's the folder I want to be in. And there's a listing of all the different versions, okay? So I was actually on version 7, so I'm actually going to go backwards. I'm going to downgrade my firmware. It's the same principle, I'm just going backwards. So select 6.1, and then select this one here, 6.1.3 DFU. Select Open, and then select Next. And then we're going to connect our USB lead first, okay, and then power our module up. And as the module powers up, it's going to connect on USB, and it's going to recognize that you're asking it to update. So it's going to say, do you want to update the firmware from 7 to 6.1? Are you sure? Yes. So now the update is going to take place, and it's going to start updating the firmware on the controller. Now this is an 8610. It's the top of the range controller. There's a lot of information for it to transfer. So I'm just going to let that do its thing, which could take a minute or two, and I'm going to answer some questions while it's running. So let's have a quick look here what we've got. Let's see. Fuel consumption on 8610 Mark II. Yes, you can. I'm not sure if I can click off this page. No, I can't at the moment. I'll have to let that run. But yes, you can do that. If you go to the engine stock. So the question here is there any options to see the fuel consumption on an 8610 Mark II? Yeah, well, because I clicked off that, I actually screwed up my firmware update there. Apologise for that. Let me just update the firmware again. Just set that off again and then we'll keep talking. So yeah, there is the option to record your fuel usage. In the engine section of Config Suite, we've actually added in a feature to update on the latest versions of the 73 and I believe the 86. There's a section in there that allows you to turn on fuel consumption. Once I've finished talking about this here, and once this firmware update's done, I will show you what I mean. Yeah, let that run its course again. Right, I'll just have to let Config Suite do its thing. So yeah, so yes, you can see the fuel consumption. I'll show you that shortly. Let's have a look at some other questions. What are the other software? Oh, Dsc Scada Suite and Scada Suite configuration used for? Okay, so when you download Configuration Suite, it also comes with a program called Scada Suite. Scada Suite is primarily for our remote displays. So I think I should be able to show you this. Yeah. So if I just go to the 8000 range, if I go to our remote displays, if we just click on the 8004, this is a really good example. This 8004 here shows a generator. Okay, you can see that on there. And the 8004 is designed to show multiple generators on one panel. So say you've got 10 generators, you can just show all that information on one panel. But to configure the 8004, you need Scada Suite software, okay? And you can lay out your gensets, according to your single line diagram. you can give them names, etc., and connect them all into one network. So Scada Suite is different software that's used for configuring the 8,000 remote display screens. Okay, so that's what Scada Suite's for, but it comes part of the package when you download Config Suite. Is there, let's have a quick look. What's the difference between bank 1 and bank 2 in the scheduler? There's no difference. It's just that you've got to have enough time slots on there. So for example, bank 1 has 8 slots, bank 2 has 8 slots. But what happens if you want to run the generator in the morning and in the afternoon? You're going to need to run, 2 slots a day. So that's 14 slots. So you'd put maybe bank 1 you'd use for the morning, bank 2 you'd use for the afternoon. That's just an example of how you'd use that. How to change the running hours. So you do the running hours in the in Config Suite, in the SCADA section, in the maintenance section. You'll find the engine hours in there, and you can make changes in there. Some of the other questions are a little bit advanced, and I think the best thing to do is probably just drop them in on an email, or I'll answer them after the course. Is it possible to connect multiple controllers? I think our update's just been done. Yep, let's have a quick look. Just 1 second while I click OK. I'm just trying to find my page. Sorry, I'm using a couple of monitors here, and it's a bit tricky. There we go. Okay, so my update's now done. And if we look on here now, look, we are reading 8610 Mark II version 6. Okay, so it's version 6.1. And what's actually happened now is I've downloaded I've updated the firmware, and that's installed what's called a default configuration file. Okay, so it's a default configuration file now. It's not the one that was in there previously. And if I just go to my Mimic, I can actually see, look, alarm stop, failed to stop. So something's indicating the engine's running. So now what I'm going to do is I've got to go and get that file I was using, and thankfully I've actually got it saved here, recent. So this is the file that I saved previously, and I want to write it back to the controller. But that file was saved when the controller was at version 7, and we're now at version 6. So I'm not going to be able to write that file straight back to the controller. Okay, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to convert it. I'm going to have to use our convert to feature. So I'm just going to open that file now and let it load in. So if I go to File and Convert to, and then to the 8000, so that's what I've got, look, 8610 Mark II version 7. If I just go to previous versions, and you can see a lot of these are grayed out. So I can't change this file to be one of those. I can only do ones that are within the 86 range. So if I go to 6.1, I can then select that. And what it's going to do now is it's going to convert that file back to being a 6.1 file. So I'll just let that do its thing. Takes a little bit of time to do it. Let that do its thing. Meanwhile, just see if there's any other good questions. So yeah, is it possible to connect? Oh, there we go. Oh, I wouldn't quite do it. Okay, that's probably because I've gone backwards. So what I always recommend you do is, if you're updating the firmware, if I just open a different one, I'll open an older one. Just give me a second. So I'm just going to find a file that's older, and then I'm going to convert that to version 6 for you, so you can get a clearer idea of how you do that. Okay, that's the one there. So I've just opened a file now, which I think is at version 5, and I'm going to convert that to version 6. So just let that load in now. Really appreciate a lot of you staying on the line, by the way. I can see that it's now where we've been doing nearly an hour and a half, and everyone's stayed on board, which is really good to see. So yeah, so that's opened up that file. That configuration file is at version 5.1, and the one we're reading is version 6.1. Okay, so if I just go File and Convert to an 8000, I'm going to convert it to 6.1. Now, as you saw earlier, I went backwards. It's probably best to use the Convert to feature going forwards, because you tend to update the firmware going upwards. Now, the thing with the Convert to feature, it's only really designed to work between the next version up. So if you've got a control that's at version 1, or the file that's at version 1, and you've updated it to version 6 firmware, I wouldn't really recommend using the Convert to feature to go from version 1 to version 6, because in between there's obviously been three or four other different versions. So there's been a lot of changes. What I recommend to do in that scenario is open Config Suite up twice, and on one menu, so that's just converting there. Like, some items may not have been converted correctly. Please check the new configuration carefully. So yeah, just going back to what I was saying, I recommend that you get two versions of Config Suite open side by side and manually go through and check everything and manually copy them over. Okay, only use the Convert to feature if you like going from version 5 to version 6 or version 6 to version 7. And like I say, going backwards, it's not really, you know, obviously I did it earlier just to show you how to do the firmware update, but I wouldn't really recommend that either. So click OK. So now at version 6.1, and the firmware on the controller is at version 6.1. So if I just click Write to Module, click Ignore, click Yes, that's now going to write that version back. Okay, so what I've done there is I've completely downgraded my controller from version 7.1 to version 6.1. Now, that's not unusual, because a lot of customers buy a controller from us and they've done their testing and approval on the Genset. It's been approved at, say, version 3. And since then, we've produced 3 or 4 new versions of the controller. So downgrading is not uncommon, but just be aware that the Convert to feature, as you saw earlier, is not great for going backwards. I always recommend just going forwards on it, really. Okay, so hopefully that's explained the firmware update. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of finish the course coming to its end now. I'm just going to run through some of the questions, but I'm just going to get a hand. Can we just get a hand raise again, just to make sure everyone's still following me? Fantastic, fantastic, brilliant. Okay, so I've had this is the first time I've done this without a panelist, and I think it's been good, but it's also made it difficult for me to keep up with everything that's going on. So we've had 33 questions come in, so I'm not going to be able to answer every single one. So I'm just going to scroll through from the beginning and just see which ones are going to be useful. So yeah, one about recording. So yeah, if you've just joined, we will be we'll edit this video at some point, and then you'll be able to download it from us. Just give us a couple of weeks and drop us an email, and we'll send you the link for it. But we just need to go back and just obviously edit it all. It won't be available from today, is what I'm saying. Yeah, some of these questions are a little bit advanced. No, it's not really relevant. Okay, good one here. I want to use a DSE 8610 controller for prime diesel genset power at a remote site. What would I use to add solar panel? Okay, so if you wanted to add a solar panel to your genset, it's essentially just adding, you know, albeit a positive load to the actual genset. It doesn't really matter to us. We just synchronize with the bus and provide power. Okay. Now you can control on an 8610, you can set the amount of power the generator produces, and you can maybe balance that with the genset, with the solar panel. So if the solar panel's not producing much, the genset will put more. If the solar panel's producing a lot of power, the genset will produce less power. But that's really we can do that, and that's fine. But I'm not going to go into detail on how to do that. That's really a question for one of our advanced courses, which are coming up later on in the month and in September. How to turn off mains monitoring, I think we've already discussed that. You just go into the generator and then mains section and turn it off. I'll just open up a 73 and show you how to do that again, just in case you've just joined the course and you've perhaps missed that. Another question here. So the difference between a 7310 and 20 is mains monitoring. I think we've already answered that one. Mark II, what does Mark II stand for? We've already done that. Oh yeah, so yeah, to turn off the mains monitor, you just click on mains options, and then turn off the mains failure detection. Yeah, answered that. DSE for pumps features communicate. Okay, so this question here, I'm not going to be able to answer this question directly, but it just says DSE for pumps application and features to communicate with telemetry device. So if you're going to be connected to a pump and you're not using it as a genset, you really need one of our E-series controllers. So something like the E400 or the E800. And in terms of telemetry, we've got the DSC, well, there's a variety of telemetry devices. It's not really clear in the question which one it is, but we do just go to our website here. If we go to products, and I've got to Genset. If we just go to remote communications and overview displays, this is where you'll find all our telemetry products. So for example, the gateways that allow you to connect to WebNet or SNMP. If you buy an 86 or 74 range controller, they come with inbuilt SNMP, and the 74 actually comes in with a web SCADA page as well, inbuilt. So I think that kind of answers that question. A good question here. Can you explain negative input, please? I think what that really means is when you configure an input on the controller, if we go digital inputs, digital inputs, if you look at, say, for example, function, remote start, close to activate, what does that mean? What it really means is you're closing the input to ground. And if we just look at the 7310, and we go to the back of the controller. In fact, it's best to use the installation instructions, which I think I've got open here actually. Yeah. Oh, that's a manual. Did I have it open here? Yeah, here we are. So if you just go to 8 digital inputs here, hopefully you can just see that okay. So pin 48 is where you wire in your digital input for digital input A. It actually says on there, use a digital input A. And if you watch the other side of the input, where the other side of the switch, that connects back to battery ground. Okay, so so basically connected to negative earth or as close as you can to battery ground. So that's what a negative input does. Okay, so that's what closed to activate means. If it's open to activate, means that when that's actually open, that input is active. Okay, so to make it become inactive, you actually have to turn the switch on. It's just working the other way around. So hopefully that answers that question. Some training documents indicated in the manuals are still not available on the website. I'm not aware of those. If you want to drop me an email with any documents that you can't find on the website but are in the manual, please let me know and I'll double check that for you. There obviously is sometimes a bit of a delay between us finishing the training documents and releasing them on the website, but it's generally pretty quick. So yeah, let us know what those documents are and I'll come back to you. Can the ATS controller switch between supplies without power failure? So what I think the question really is, if we just go back to one of our ATS range controllers, let's just pretend we've got a generator on this on S2 and a main supply on S1. If mains fails, and the generator's got to start and go on load, well, in that period of time, this is basically the site's going to have no power going to it whatsoever, and that could mean that the ATS has got no power going to it whatsoever as well. And that could mean that this controller then switches off. Well, in its default state, this is still sending the output to the generator to start. So the command there is still there for the generator to start. And obviously once the generator starts, closes its breaker, this should hopefully come back online. But what people tend to do is this is obviously wired off of a battery. So even if this fails and this fails, the control panel remains online. Okay, that tends to be the same way we do it. But we do actually make a power supply specifically for that. And it's called the DSE 160 self-sinking power supply. And this actually has 3 sources of power. So it would mean the mains, the generator, or the battery. Okay, whichever one's available, it will switch to. If all 3 are available, it'll switch to the mains. And then if the mains fails, it'll switch to the generator. If the generator's not available, it'll switch to the battery. And then that will keep the power supply on the site always on. Okay, that tends to be how it works. I think that answers that question. Just cancel that, dismiss that one. Training documents, as I've already mentioned, just as a bit of a reference, if you click on any of our products and go to additional downloads, you'll find all the training documents specific to that module on there. Obviously, this is only a power supply. There's not that many training documents on it. But if you go to a 7310, for example, you'll find, if you go to training documents, additional downloads, you'll find all the documentation in there. So hopefully that answers that question. We don't have a comparison chart between all our modules. So the question here is there a comparison chart between various modules? There isn't, no. And the simple reason is it's just too difficult to manage because we're making changes all the time. What I do say is use Config Suite to look in the manuals, and if needs be, give us a call, because it's good for us to speak to customers and explain things in more detail, because just because you have a comparison chart doesn't necessarily always answer all your questions. You might want to know a little bit more detail about certain features. So just give us a call. That's what we're here for. What is the difference between a failure control and automatic start controls? I think we've already discussed that. So a 10 is just a standalone generator controller. A 20 is a generator controller with mains failure protection built in. Let's keep going. Do we have a hardware simulator? No, I've actually got a suitcase here that I have a couple of modules in that I kind of, it's something of a simulation, but we can't really simulate gensets here at the moment. But on the 8610, we do have what's called simulate injection, where we can simulate voltages, so you can test your under and overprotection voltages, but that's a topic for another day. Yeah, is it possible to connect multiple controllers to a computer via USB simultaneously? Yes, it is. All you do is you just connect into your other USB ports on your desktop, on your laptop, and then you just select the number in there and pick whichever controller it is you want. So your software will still recognize it. See any other good questions? Yeah, another question about simulate injection testing, feature unlock codes. I think they're another topic for a training course that's going to be coming further down the line. How to change the running hours? If you just go to the maintenance section, so if you want to change the running hours of the generator, you go to SCADA, maintenance, and then you go to hours run and number of starts, and you can reset them in here. If the hours are being read from the ECU, that's not always possible. Bank 1 and Bank 2 in the schedule, I think we've answered that. Let's keep going. I think that's about it, actually. Just some people say they couldn't see my my screen earlier on. Yeah, there's a lot of the questions in there that are just, I think they're just too advanced for today, and I think it's something that if you want to ask those kinds of questions, just send them in on the technical support team. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the course, and I'm just going to mute my mic for 10 minutes. I'll leave the course live and running. If you want to ask me any questions, or there's something that you want more information on, just fire them in. I'll come back online. It's 11:44 now, so I'll come back on the line at 11:50. So if you want to ask any questions, put them in now. I'll come back. I'll check the questions. If there's any that I think are really relevant, I'll answer them. If not, we'll call it a day. So I'm just going to mute Mike now. If you want to, obviously, I realise I've gone on for some time now, an hour and 3/4. I know a lot of people probably want to get back to the jobs or whatever. So if that's the case, great. Thank you very much for joining us today. If you're going to be leaving us now, I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us. And I'm just going to I'm going to mute the course now, and just if any questions, just pump them in, and I'll come back in on the line in 5 minutes' time. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, everyone, welcome back. And I can see I've still got we've still got 25 people on the course, which is great. So, and there's a couple of questions just come in now. If I just could get a quick hand raise just to make sure everyone's still with me. Fantastic. Great stuff. Okay, brilliant. So there's some good questions coming actually in the 5 minutes I've been away. So good question here. Is it possible that training manuals can be incorporated to the config suite in the same way as the manuals? We don't really have, I think what you mean there is training documents, but yeah, that's a good idea. I don't think we would do that because config suite is becoming huge. And we do have a lot of customers now who've stopped downloading all the manuals, but I should point out actually, there's a nice opportunity to show you. If you go to the help section and you go to manuals, all the manuals we've talked about today are actually all in config suite. When you download config suite, you have the option to select the manuals. So I always recommend that you download them. But yeah, that's a good idea. Adding the training documents in there as well. I will feed that back and see where we go with it. But it is a good suggestion that. Next question. If we apply negative input, digital input, what will happen? So I think what you're saying there is if you accidentally put 12 volts into your digital inputs, what will happen? Well, it kind of depends how much current's behind it, but it potentially could damage the module. We do have protection built in there to stop those kind of things happen, but if you do it often enough, you will eventually damage the controller. Next question, fuel consumption. Okay, yeah, I wanted to talk about this earlier, didn't I? And then we had a bit of a problem with the controller. So I'll just read from my 8610 for now. Pretty sure it's on this module. So this is becoming more and more commonplace, whereby customers want to know how much fuel they're using per hour. And this gives me a good opportunity actually just to run through some of the fuel usage features we've actually put on the controllers quite recently. I think the 86 has it. If not, it's something that's going to be coming very soon. So you can see there, just there's a couple of questions about how do I read and write. You can see I've just read from the controller there. So just let that load in. So if you go to the engine section and go to fuel use and efficiency, this is where you configure your fuel usage alarms, sorry, not your fuel usage alarm, your fuel efficiency curves. So first of all, you select the engine type. So there's already some preloaded curves in here. And a curve is the first thing you need to do is you need to configure this efficiency curve. So if you don't have, there's already some predefined, like this Volvo one here. If you just click on a Volvo TAD one, for example, that's the curve. And that's the manufacturer's curve that they've given us. So we can put that curve into our controller. Okay, so what it's saying there is that 100% load, it's using 200 grams per kilowatt hour of fuel. Okay, so you'll need to obtain that information from the manufacturer. You can, of course, create your own curve as well. Or if you just select not used, if you select down here, instrumentation sources, instrumentation fuel consumption, if you select, okay, if I select Volvo, I can then select efficiency curve. So that means it's going to get that information from that curve, okay? If I had an ECU configured, like a Volvo ECU or Scania or whatever, I could just select engine ECU and it will get that information from the engine ECU, because a lot of ECUs transmit this information anyway. And I always recommend you use the ECU information if you can, because it tends to be the most accurate, because the manufacturers obviously checked it and they will have gone through much stricter they will have gone through strict regulation check-ins when they've done it to meet, no doubt, the emission standards. Once you've turned any of these on, if you turn on efficiency curve or you turn on engine ECU, if you navigate to the engine page on your controller, you'll see that menu on there. So that's how you do that. So yeah, good question. If you want to contact, yeah, what's our email address? Our email address is support@deepseaelectronics.com. So if you have any questions you want to ask us, you've got a lot of questions you want to ask, perhaps you just want to get a bit of dialogue going with us, it's support@deepseaelectronics.com. And then final question, if I update the firmware, does it affect the previous settings? Yes, it puts the controller back to its default state. So you must save the file and then convert it to whatever version you're going to. Okay, so you must save the file and convert it because it puts it back to its previous settings. So what tends to happen there is you might buy a controller that's at version 7, downgrade the controller, and then write the configuration file. Perhaps you've saved it previously from another set or something like that. So all that's left for me to do today, I think that's about it for now, is I'll just flick my video on again. Okay, can you all see me there? Can I just get a quick hand raise? Brilliant. Okay, so last question. The last thing to say really is just thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Really appreciate it. The course has gone on for nearly 2 hours, which is a lot longer than I envisaged. So really appreciate you sticking online and staying with us. Keep checking back to the website. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel. There's more videos coming and more training courses coming. And all I'll say is stay safe, everyone, and hopefully see you all soon. Thank you very much.